So, I mean, Armen, we know from our last series that we talked about you working with pretty much the entire complex or genus of Anolis, right? What what in the field have you really like? I mean, you talked briefly about being in the field in certain areas. What is one of the best stories you could share? Positive, please, at this point, because I know we'll get to negative. I'm sure there are some, but I'd love to hear one of your best stories about maybe finding something that isn't commonly seen or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. So, um, I've only really gone one place, which is Ecuador, in search of anoles. And when I went there, there's so many species there, and a lot of them we've never seen because there's really no export out of Ecuador. So they're there, and usually they're not in captivity anywhere. Um, so I think one really cool one, well, there's a lot of really cool ones, but one cool place that I got to see a lot of the cool ones in Ecuador is in the cloud forests, and the specific area is Mindo. So it's a cooler area, and you wouldn't expect the knolls to be there, but it's during the days it's 60s to 70s, and at nights it drops into the 50s. And
Wow.
yeah, so it's really high up in the mountains, and there's a lot of cool species. Um, just to name a few that we saw there, one is called Friseri, which the common name is the hippie anole. They get over 18 inches, and
Oh my
Holy
God.
they're
moly.
yeah, they're bright green, and they have like a red head. They're really cool. Um,
Sounds
there's Gemosis, which is the gem anole. They're a bright green with a lot of big white spots, so they look like a jewel. Um, Equatoralis is similar to Gemosis, but they get bigger and their spots are smaller, and their dewlap is about as big as their body once it's all the way out. It's incredible.
wow.
And then the pinnacle of anoles in Ecuador is it's called proboscis. It's the Pinocchio lizard. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture, but they're have the
Yep.
anole body, but then they have a nose that's just as long as their head's sticking out. And
Wow.
sorry to get to the bad news part of herping, but we only found a female. The whole trip, we only found one female, and the females don't have the nose. It was still cool to see the species, but it would have been cool to see a male because they have that iconic face. But regardless, it was very cool and awesome. And that, if I do go back to Ecuador, I think I would just spend my whole time in Mindo because the cloud forest species definitely intrigued me the most.
That's
Um,
awesome.
but
And
yeah,
I did you find all of those species that
yeah,
you
we found
you had
all of
just
them.
mentioned? Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was super cool.
Yeah, one thing I always think about, talking about how you only found the female is like sometimes I wonder if I'm going out herping, um, like should I, I'm always like maybe I should just pick one thing, that I really want to find and just like devote my time to that because usually what I do is I go out and like my ADD mind like goes bananas and I'm just like here and there and everywhere and I'm like, oh, I'm bored of this and I'll go over here, go over there, and a lot of times I'm like, maybe I should like stick it out in like one type of habitat for a while instead of getting so.
Yeah. So the example of the knolls, we would never find the Pinocchio lizard in the Amazon in Ecuador. You have to go to the high cloud forest of Mindo. They're only in a few square mile area of one stretch of road. So that's one very specific example. But like, for example, this weekend I visited some friends in Arizona for a herping trip, and one half of one day we devoted to going to go find Gila monsters. So that's a very different area and habitat that you're going to be looking for Gila monsters. Then, for example, I then wanted to go find Madrine alligator lizards. They're a cool alligator lizard that have stripes along the body, and those are again higher up elevations and a lot cooler, where you'll never find a Gila monster. So depending what you're looking for, you're definitely going to want to not only know the right general area, but you're going to want to know the habitat. You're not going to find a Gila monster um, in the mountains, and you're not going to find an alligator lizard in the desert. So you kind of have to plan for that. Also, you have to know if not only is it the right general habitat, but are there even those animals there? If no one's ever found one there, or you've never seen one there, there's always a possibility, but it's always good to cross-reference with other people, go on iNaturalist, try to find where stuff is. Otherwise, you can waste a lot of time looking for something that is not there to begin with.
Yeah.
I noticed it's like really hard. Other than iNaturalist, I noticed it's very difficult to like get that sort of information because I think, I mean, and rightfully so. I think people are protective and don't want to, you know, spoil the riches, basically, you know, like which I understand. But from somebody who was like intent on like, you know, learning and really wanting to get into it, it's a little, you know, disappointing when someone's like, you know, well, I don't know, you know, but you know that they know because they post pictures.
Well, that's the case where it's all about making relationships and making new friends and going out and finding people on in Facebook groups or clubs or whatever it may be. Take some effort to build those relationships, because a lot of times there are those secret spots where there's like a rattlesnake den where there's 20
Right.
rattlesnakes and only 3 people know where it is. And if you're not friends with them, and a lot of people that are friends with them aren't even, they're like, no, sorry, I'm not taking you there. So it's just like very, and it's mainly because as more people know where something is, the wrong apple finds it and they just take everything. So, of course, taking an animal here and there for captive breeding is normal and totally fine in my opinion, but it's not sustainable when you go wipe out a whole population of something. And that's why people have become so secretive, because you can't go find them anymore for fun. They're gone and sold on, you know, Morph Market or something, and it's a bummer.
It is a big bummer. I mean, here in New York, I don't have that much to. We don't. Our wildlife is completely protected. Not that people don't take them in. Obviously, I'm sure people do still, but I actually got a message a couple months ago about a diamond terrapin. Somebody had you know, they took a baby turtle home. Oh, what is it? Oh, it's a diamond terrapin. Yeah, one of the single most endangered species in New York. But you know, and it was like this big. So hatched that year, never learned anything. Anyway, it's really hard to find enough land here to really be able to go and look for the small amount of reptiles we have. Now, that excludes turtles, because you can find turtles in just about every body of water pretty easily. And there are certain places that water exists within, you know, vernal pools, things like that, that exist all summer, where we can find spotted turtles and wood turtles and a lot of other things that are essentially located around that water source. But when it comes to snakes and it comes to lizards, it's just an almost impossible thing to predict as far as I've been introduced to. I mean, rattlesnakes are one thing. Again, like you said, if you know somebody that knows a den, it's super easy to find it, super easy to get there. If you know somebody that has been there before, they always return to the same place. But if you don't know those people, you're never going to find them. I mean, they're just so secretive. And so I think I have seen 2 timber rattlesnakes in the wild. That was it. I've been outside most of my life looking for timber rattlesnakes, and I've seen 2. Meanwhile, I have friends that post, you know, pictures constantly. I shouldn't say friends, I should say Facebook friends, that post constantly on Facebook, and they're from New Hampshire or other places, and they, you know, oh, look at this den of 20 rattlesnakes. Look at this. I caught this on my trail camera. There's like 4 rattlesnakes just sitting out on a rock. Thanks, guys. Makes me feel like a completely adept herper. Appreciate it.
Yeah, there's lots of situations no matter where you are. For example, Western Diamondbacks, it's like a treasure to find one in my area, at least of Southern California. They're just so far and few between. But then when you go to Arizona like this weekend, that's the most common rattlesnake you're gonna find, and they're a dime a dozen. So it just like you said, some people it's not only whether you know the spots, but some places just even though it's in their range, some places aren't as good as others because just naturally they're more successful in other parts of their range. So
Right.
same with the timber rattlesnakes, I'm sure, which is a really cool species.
Very cool species. And I
Yeah,
I've seen 1,000 timbers in captivity, just so we're clear. I've worked
yeah.
with timbers in captivity, but I've only seen the two in the wild. And I mean that was recent. That was within the last 5 years. So
Mhm.
Yeah, I had a thought that's now gone. So interesting. I was like, yeah, and then the thought was completely gone.
that's okay.
It was something that Brian just said that sparked a thought in me. Something about, yeah, I have no idea. Um, so anyway, so what have you found like locally to you, Armin?
Locally, there's
Now,
lots of different
hold
types
on,
of snakes.
before you answer that, what do you consider local? Like, what would be local? Because I know California is like way bigger than Connecticut. So
Yeah,
I'm thinking like, you know, Southern California.
locally, yeah, Southern California, I'd say is within like a 2.5 hour radius.
Yeah,
Um, and so there's all sorts of stuff because we have coastal stuff, and then we have more desert inland or montane stuff. So there's lots of snakes, a few types of rattlesnakes, mainly not Mojave. I mean, we have those, but not very often. Mainly Southern Pacific rattlesnakes and red diamond rattlesnakes. Um, which there's also the Western Diamondback, but the weirdly enough, the Western Diamondbacks aren't protected, but there's way less than the red Diamondbacks, which are Crotalus ruber, are protected. But see them way more than I've ever seen a Western Diamondback. We have lots of non-venomous snakes, king snakes, gopher snakes, racers, coach whips, um, all sorts of night snakes, lyre snakes, all sorts of weird small snakes. And then as far as lizards, endless amounts of lizards, mainly like types of Scalporus, which are fence lizards like bluebellies, alligator lizards,
That's neat.
lots of different frogs, newts, not very many turtles. There's desert tortoises, which are rare. And yeah, we that's about around me. That's the gist that I can think of. There's all sorts of tiny little lizards and random snakes, but it's mostly like king snakes, gopher snakes, rattlesnakes, and lizards.
yeah.
That's a
I know you
pretty cool
guys are
group.
like lucky when it comes to like lizards. Um,
Yeah.
because the only lizard in Connecticut and I think possibly New York too is I think it's the 5-line skink.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I want to say the 5-line skink, which I've seen one my entire life, and it was at work and it was under a tarp, and that's the only time I've ever seen one. Um, so that would be like for me, like I know I don't live there, so it's not like oh, just a bunch of lizards. I would be like, oh my
Yeah.
god, there's a bunch of lizards.
Yeah. No,
Because
I love finding lizards. It's super fun. But yeah, there's like I want to stay close to 8 to 10 different types of skinks that are all small and look similar, but they're different species. Um, and it's just you never like every time you go out herping, you kind of get surprised. You never know what you're gonna find because of course there's areas where you're targeting something specific, but there's always called bycatch, where you're finding stuff that you don't intend to. Because usually when you go out herping, you have a target species or a few target species, but just the way it always works, you're finding way more of what you aren't looking for than what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, a lot of times I go out with like the intent on finding a garter snake, an eastern garter snake. I don't know why. I do know why. I love them. I've always loved them. But I have never found a garter snake ever. And it's like the most common snake. Maybe black racers might be the most common. At least that's what I've seen the most. That it seems like you know, like it's like on the trail. Black racers are always like somewhere where you are. They seem to hang out like along the trails. Like right off the side, like in the grass or whatever. But for whatever reason, garter snakes, they evade me every time I go out looking for them. And I actually just found a ribbon snake this weekend for the first time.
Nice.
Which I think, from what I read, is a type of garter snake, or whatever.
I mean, I know they look very similar.
They do look similar
in New York. Yeah, they look. I mean, people send me pictures all the time, and I'm like, no, that's a ribbon snake. It's not a garter. And they're like, no, it's a garter snake. And then we get into semantics, but
yeah,
it's I here in New York we have a lot of black rat snakes. I know their Latin name recently changed, and they're not called the black rat snake anymore. I think they're called the Eastern or something like that. But that is the most plentiful serpent that I see. It's probably the most plentiful serpent that I get pictures of, especially as babies. They're like, oh, I found a copperhead. No, you didn't. Go put it back outside. Like, because to me, and that's a really interesting point. When you're field herping and you're going out with people that don't know what they're looking at, or you're offering a service of being able to ease the general people's mind about what species they're looking at. I can take about this much of a section of a snake scale, a snake picture, of their body, and I can pretty much ID most of the species here in New York State. But that's because I've been doing it for so long. When it comes to, this much of the 3 or 4 different species of rattlesnakes that look almost identical in your particular neck of the woods, I would be like, that's a rattlesnake. I know it's a rattlesnake, but I have no idea what kind of rattlesnake it is. And I think that's a big thing for people to really understand. Just because you think it's something doesn't mean it is something. And you should, even if you're 110% about it, you still shouldn't blindly go walking through the woods without some sort of knowledge first. You should always look up the stuff that you want to go find and make sure what else may be in that habitat that may look similar, especially if there's things that are endangered, or obviously the most important reason, if they're venomous. This way you're not complicating yourself into a New York, or should I say United States healthcare system, of getting an envenomation because you wanted to go find a garter snake in your backyard. It's so that was a poor reference. I'm sorry. I wasn't calling you out directly, Greg. I apologize. But it's a really important thing to arm yourself with information before you walk into the woods trying to find anything. In Armen's case, that each one of those species of lizard is a different species. To somebody else, they may not know that. They may not appreciate it. One of them might be endangered, and that's the one that they kept in a napkin too long and it passes away or something, to take better video or pictures of at some point. I mean, it's just, those little things are very important. And while people who do this a lot or have done this for a long time know that, it's still something that we, as the I'd say longtime herpers, or at least, keepers of reptiles that really know what we're talking about, looking at, doing, should impart on the next generation. Don't go out and destroy habitat. Just go out, look cleanly, look nicely, look neatly, find the animals you're looking for, and make sure you know what else might be in that area so you don't get hurt accidentally. Just figured that would be a really good part of this series, Greg. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that is too, because I was actually going to talk about like with my enclosures in my house, I've talked about this on the podcast before about how I I have the snakes, I have a leopard gecko. But what I really have is like a mini environment, like I'm not just interested in the animal, like I'm interested in the ecosystem where it comes from.
Right.
So like I go into like herping with the same sort of thought process. Like I need to respect nature. I need to respect this snake's environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that means like if I happen to like pick up a rock or a log to look for something, like I need to put the rock or the log back the exact same way that I found it, whether there's something in there or not, because something probably will be in there at some point.
It
or
could
just
be
came from there.
It could be a last resort to a species that might need that particular rock at some particular time that it's used it before. And now it gets eaten by the hawk or owl instead of being able to escape properly if you don't put it back. I get it. I think the same way.
Yeah.
Have you? Yep. Go ahead, Armen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I agree. It's always, that's the rule of thumb, is leave it exactly how you found it, or better. If there's trash some places here when you're flipping, there's like trash that you're flipping, like boards or old carpet or whatever, and usually you're leaving it there because now it's become habitat. But for example, if you're on a trail and you find plastic or a can or something, if you can put it in your backpack and take it with you, you might as well.
Yeah.
That's
and that's just like basic, that's like, at least for me, that's just like basic, like hiking behavior, like it says.
Yep.
Carry in, carry out. Go into like a hiking trail, there's like a thing that says, what you brought in with you, bring out with you, and
carry in, carry out.
And not everyone does that. So you might end up walking out with a few extra things, but it is what it is.
Always clean up as you go.
Yeah.
We're custodians for humans we'll never meet. It's an unfortunate thing. It's a double-edged sword. I want to tell everyone to go out and look for animals and be in nature, and nature's amazing. You just have to be there, But at the same point in time, I don't want that many more people going out and understanding how beautiful nature is, because humans destroy things, period. We have a local watering hole home to a lot of different species of reptiles, specifically northern water snakes, which are probably the single most cantankerous species as far as species that live around me go. Definitely willing to chew on you without even, they are not afraid of anything. This watering hole is home to, a very decent population, and I get calls every single fall that there's copperheads everywhere. They're out on the rocks. As soon as the temperature starts to cool off to a little bit lower than what the norm is, like we'll have 80s all through summer, 80s and 90s all through summer, and as soon as it starts to hit that 72-degree mark, they're laying on the rocks trying to soak up all that extra heat. And man, I can't even tell you, like, I literally I don't even respond half the time. Just, you're fine. Everything's fine. Let them go. They'll be okay. They're not a copperhead. I almost guarantee it. Now with the advent of cell phones, you can immediately text me a picture and I can really quantify, or I can really actually guarantee it. But like, it's just so upsetting that you can go into this natural habitat as a human and not know what is around you and immediately be fearful of it because it looks like something else, or it's a snake. Oh my God, help me. I mean, if I called my friend's American bulldog, a French bulldog. I mean, God, obviously they're very different. Well, they're the same species and they look very different. Snakes are very different species and they look very different, at least to me. And I'm sure everybody that we start this series with and talk to are probably going to feel the very same way about it. Like I know that's a different species. I know that's a different animal. I know that's, and I mean, it doesn't hurt to just arm yourself with a little bit of information before you go somewhere, even if you're enjoying. Like I learned the hard way when I was younger. We went to Arizona. The sign at the pool in the hotel we were staying at said, "Tap your shoes before you put them on." And I was like, well, what kind of silly crap is that? Well, there's bark scorpions in Arizona. They don't want you to die. Pretty good. Well, I mean, specifically, it's fatal for like little kids. I understand, but they don't want you to have an adverse reaction in their pool area and potentially die because you don't live in the state where scorpions come from. Not that that's the only state. I feel like I need to correct that, but I don't want to. But not that that's the only state that scorpions actually are. That's the kind of information that is crucial to survival for humans. And we're putting ourselves as herpers directly into the field. And we're potentially interacting with, I mean, especially in your case, Armen, you have a lot of very venomous snakes around you. At least living within your environment, which, do 100 people die a month with that many animals in your direct surrounding? No, clearly they don't. And humans can coexist with these animals if you just don't put your hand in that plant at the pottery bar or at the Home Depot, before you look, don't leap before you look. It's just real simple things that we were taught as young people to understand. And it can be related to everything, especially when you go out in nature. I mean, the snake you're hunting, the snake you're looking for, the snake that you're grabbing by the tail may not be the thing that hurts you. Being mindful of your surroundings and not falling off the cliff or not doing something else negative to your own body is a very important lesson as well. Regardless, so have you ever worked with any of the venomous snakes that are in your area? Do you like go out and get them out of somebody's yard or any of that kind of work at all?
It's not like I don't have a business or I don't advertise that I relocate snakes or anything. But if a friend has a snake in their backyard and they call me, I will definitely go help them. But it's not my thing. But
Right.
I have no problem herping or helping someone move a rattlesnake, if I have the right tools or if I have to use sticks or whatever. But yeah, they're rattlesnakes are really the only venomous snakes we have around here. So they're pretty easy to work with. They don't move too fast. They can strike fast, but as far as like getting away, they're easy to manage in that way as long as you're careful of the strike range and stuff.
Right.
Granted, definitely by no means, I want to make it clear, I'm by no means a professional herper. I am just a hobbyist novice herper. But the dozens and dozens of times I've dealt with rattlesnakes, it's usually I've always really been in control, I felt. But again, I don't think anyone that hasn't dealt with a rattlesnake should just go out on their own and do it. If you're gonna intentionally target rattlesnakes, 100% I would recommend you go with someone that's more experienced than you the first probably dozen times and watch how they handle a venomous snake, because the rattlesnakes around here will kill you. So it's like
Yeah.
you get bit and you do not go to the hospital and get antivenom, you will die. Like
Yeah.
it's more than 50% likely that you will die. If you don't die, you will lose your foot or arm or leg
Yep.
if you don't get treated. So it's a lot of fun, but it's not a joke. So
Right.
and even if you're going out looking for a king snake or an alligator lizard, they're sharing that habitat with the
Exactly.
highly venomous animals. So regardless if you're even looking for snakes, bring a snake hook for flipping boards or logs, because if you put your hand under there and there's a rattlesnake instead of an alligator lizard, the rattlesnake bite is going to
Yep.
do a lot more damage than an alligator lizard. So just like you were saying, you have to be aware of what's around you, and you have to treat everything like there's a rattlesnake, even if you don't expect there to be one. You never know, and like I said, you oftentimes find what you're not looking for.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
in the
and
unlucky situation, it can be a lot of damage and issues.
yep. And it could potentially, in a lot of the cases of the animals that you have out there, could potentially be a lifelong situation after that. You know, I've heard horror stories of even copperhead venom having lasting effects within the human body, and negative things can happen years and years and years down the road. Don't quote me on that. You know, that's probably old science at this point, but you know, it wouldn't surprise me when you introduce a venom cocktail of proteins into your body. Who knows what the lengthy effect of whatever could last in there could be. Um, but that is a real possibility. And, you know, you want to go out and hang out with friends and you want to look for cool animals. But at the same point in time, you're absolutely correct. That rock could house a rattlesnake or an alligator lizard. Lift it up and use something else. Don't use your hands. I mean, I worked with venomous snakes in captivity and we didn't use our hands. Like I was always a hands-off keeper, never free handled or any of that stuff. I don't promote it. I don't tell people not to do it. I just prefer people don't show it to other people. That's my whole theory. You want to do what you want to do what you want to do. Don't tell the rest of the world that you can do that and that you do that. That's all I care about. This way nobody else thinks they can.
Yeah.
But the reason we were hands off is New York State has some pretty strict laws when it comes to wildlife. And so I taught myself how to use a hook. I taught myself how to use a hook with an 11-foot yellow anaconda. That was really easy to learn how to handle a rattlesnake after an 11-foot anaconda. Rattlesnakes do not bite anywhere near as much as that snake tried. As a matter of fact, the two rattlesnakes and two copperheads and one cottonmouth that I've worked with never even really tried to bite me ever. They were very placid. They were very calm. It's almost like they know, like they know if you mean to hurt them, and they'll defend themselves if necessary. The two that I saw in the wild, completely at ease around me. I literally snapped pictures, walked around, you know, did a whole bunch of things around it, never even rattled once. Didn't even care that I didn't see me as a threat, which is amazing to you know, everybody thinks these animals are monsters, but they're really not. And if you observe them in their natural habitat and you observe their behaviors, you realize at some point that they're not this crazy, I mean to kill you, harmful, you know, just let me be and let me hunt the mice in your yard and I will move on. I promise. That's where we should all go with snakes. Let them be.
It is interesting. You know, I
Yep.
was thinking, Brian, it's interesting that you said, you know, people call and say there's, you know, copperheads everywhere. That's what you said, copperheads, right?
Everywhere.
Yeah, there's
Yep.
copperheads everywhere. Which is interesting because, and I'm not sure what species you have in California, Armen, you know, that are like this, but I know that the copperhead, they blend in so well. Like it's by far, in my view anyway, the most camouflaged snake species. At least in the Northeast. You know, aside from when they're like in between rocks. But if they're on the ground, like you don't see them unless you're looking for them or one moves. So it is interesting that people would go to, there's copperheads everywhere.
Yep.
When in reality there probably is copperheads everywhere, but they don't
But
see
they don't
them
know,
because
yeah.
of how good
Yep.
they are at camouflage. So that it is an interesting sort of fear-based, you know, reaction that people have like that, you know, given the fact that like science would tells me that that's probably the last thing that I would say in that situation. So
Right.
it is interesting. So I don't know, Armin, is there what is out there like that, for in your area that people are like, oh my God, there's such and such everywhere when that's not what it is.
Um, I don't know. It just depends on because there's so many different like small areas that have different stuff here. But one thing is definitely people confuse gopher snakes with rattlesnakes a lot.
Mm.
The patterns and colors are the most similar out of all the snakes. Those two look alike. I mean, a a rattlesnake doesn't look much like a California king snake, so it's hard to. But um,
Unless you just see the tail without a rattle.
that's true.
No,
You never know.
no, that's not true.
Some people don't.
Don't indulge me.
Uh,
Don't do
but
that.
but they, I don't think people realize, just like the copperhead, just how many rattlesnakes there can be.
Right.
In some areas, like there's one area where there's a whole neighborhood, and then behind it there's a big wall and like a drainage ditch, and they've um put a bunch of rocks kind of as a barrier, or what's the right word? It's kind of like a retaining wall of rocks. And
Okay.
in there, behind the houses, which there's literally houses and neighborhood, and it just hundreds and hundreds of homes. That's like one of the most prime herping spots around here, where you can go in the morning and expect to find 10 rattlesnakes in the rocks there, because it's just the perfect area. But there's so many rodents in those rocks that they've put now, but there's no reason for them to leave and go over to the houses. Of course, I'm sure there are every now and then, but
Right.
it's just one case where there's so many right there that living basically in harmony, only 100 feet away from hundreds of people.
Right.
So there
and to be serious, there aren't reports of snake bites in that area every day.
right, exactly. It's very
Right.
uncommon. If anything, it's usually dogs that get bit more than people, because when you hear rattlesnakes are nice, because when you hear that rattle, everyone knows.
Yep.
There's a rattlesnake. So humans, once they hear a rattle, it's hard to get bit, because it's there, and you're looking and you see it and you go away. Versus
Right.
dogs will still go up to them and try to figure it out, and then they get bit. And dog bites of rattlesnakes are so much more common than human bites. So that's a lot of people do dog preventive training, so that dogs know what a rattlesnake sounds like and looks like, and they're trained
Stay
to
away from it.
stay away. So
That's amazing. I didn't even think about that.
yeah.
What a great thing to bring to this conversation, enlightening us about rattlesnakes biting dogs on the other side of the country. And it's so prevalent that they're actually teaching dogs, as I would assume young dogs, puppies and whatnot, some kind of behavioral understanding that noise or this smell or whatever is a rattlesnake and it's dangerous and stay away from it. That's another avenue of being prepared for the environment you live in. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a really good thing. Thank you for sharing that. That was awesome. I liked hearing that. It makes me happy when humans are smart.
Yeah.
It's so far the other direction all the time that these moments of true understanding make me happy.
Another thing I was thinking about too, you were just talking about, Armin, about in the morning how many rattlesnakes can be found in that one area of like that one like rock wall. And I do wonder, had there, say there were no houses there and there was that rock wall that was there, like I wonder if it would be the same, because how much does like human encroachment play into like where a species is like concentrated, like would they be that concentrated if there weren't all those houses?
Yeah. Well, I think the reason they're all there is because so many rodents are there. Like you walk and you look in the cracks and you just see like rat nests, and you see rat poop everywhere, or mice, whatever species of rodents there.
Yeah.
So that's why the rattlesnakes just live there and wait there, and the rocks heat up in the morning so they can get warm, and then when it gets too hot, they can go down into the rocks where it's cool still. So they unintentionally created like the perfect habitat versus a rattlesnake that's living on the hillside where, yeah, there's a rock outcrop here and there, but they'll have to find a burrow. They have to go in burrows or hide under bushes or find the perfect place to bask. Versus this is like you built the perfect terrarium where they got their hot spot, their cool hide, their food is running across in front of them every night. So it's one situation where humans have created like an artificial reef of sorts that now they've all come there and there's so much food. It's become like almost a man-made rattlesnake then.
That's
so yeah.
amazing. And I mean, that's something that I'd like to learn more about if you have like specifics at some point or pictures or something to share later on. Only because the timber rattlesnake is a very endangered animal and could potentially use some human fake reefing to help them survive. It's almost like the sharks out on Cape Cod, you know. Well, I don't understand why the sharks are here. They've never been here before. Well, that's because we hunted all their seals. They were never there because the seals weren't there. Now the seals are back, the sharks come back.
Yep.
Okay. Humans did that. Oh, what do you mean? You don't like giant great whites on your beach? Why not? Maybe you shouldn't have saved the seals then. Yeah, with the cute and cuddly come the top predators, guys. Like that's the way it works in this world.
Yep. There's a spot right on the border of California and Mexico that's a really good herping spot. But the only reason it's a really good herping spot is because it's where people dump a lot of their junk, like their sofas and bathtubs and old just like tile and plywood and stuff. But it's became the perfect rodent, like mice, rats, and
Haven,
rabbit
yeah.
breeding ground. So, and that it's also become a good area for insects because it's a kind of a flat area and lots of plants too. So unintentionally, you've created the perfect area for snakes to live, and it's easy to find them because it's easy. There's so much stuff on the ground that you flip, and if again, you've made an artificial reef where they can go under the boards, warm up if they need to, or find spots where they can cool down, and they just go. Each board has a rat nest or a mouse nest, and it's just
Unbelievable.
weird how we can unintentionally create such perfect environments for them when usually they'd be much more spread out. Now you can find sometimes a few different species under one board, which is super cool.
Yeah. Here that's actually naturally occurring. Our native rattlesnake den with copperheads and the rat snakes in our area. You know, that's a lot of zoological exhibits, depending on where you are here in the Northeast. They also display them in that same group, timbers and copperheads and the black rats. And to my knowledge, I know I keep saying black rats to the internet. That's going to obliterate me. I've been saying it for 25 years. It's hard not to. But the zoological I've never heard of any problem with those three living together in any zoological facility at all. I just think it's remarkable that, you know, more species don't do it confirmed as much as they do it here. You know, I kind of figured dens are at a premium, right? More at like in Florida, you know, the eastern diamondback. I'm surprised they don't den up with some of the other animals that live in the area. Snakes specifically, even non-venomous, just because there are many rat snake species that live down there. And they could also, you know, they all pretty much inhabit the gopher tortoise dens, but with the decline of the gopher tortoise, there's a decline of the holes. There's a decline of the eastern diamondback because of the decline, not specifically. It's also other reasons, but there's also a decline based on the fact that there is no den site for them, which I find to be another situation of the tortoise may have become endangered and then the rattlesnake has become endangered because of the ill effect of the tortoise not being so plentiful. I just find stuff like that to be intriguing because we are at fault somehow as human beings most of the time, whether it's taking the land away from the tortoise or doing negative things to impact the ecosystem and destroying those symbiotic relationships that we don't even know exist yet. Because at the time we started making that tortoise endangered, we may not have known that there was such a direct link between those two species. And that's another part of that. Be mindful of what you're doing while you're in nature so you don't screw it up. But we're not the ones building these giant places for humans to live and destroying the natural habitats. So that's a little bit different in terms of a scale of potential extinction. But we owe it to all animals in nature to do that the right way. Even the that field you were talking about where there's a lot of garbage and debris and things, that's an unnatural ecosystem. If that stuff was ever moved out of there, all of those snakes would have a really hard time finding food, because I'm sure a lot of those rodents would probably die off because there's no longer that safety of humanity, human garbage there. Nature has a way of balancing things out so that there isn't 25 snakes under one board, and it's natural competition. It's survival of the fittest in its simplest form. But we've definitely tipped the balance of those scales in a hopefully not an undamning way where we're never going to be able to solve it, but hopefully with like-minded people like ourselves having conversations like this, maybe we can change that scenario for the next group of people that are going to go out into the woods and do what they're going to do. Looking for the animals that they're looking for, and regardless, I mean, even non-reptile animal searches, I like all animals. Even gray squirrels intrigue me sometimes when they're doing weird things in the trees and I don't know what they're doing because I don't study mammals at all, and I'm like, what is that squirrel doing? Why is it moving like that? It's just fascinating to be there, see it happen. We still have to protect it, even though they're like the vermin of the tree. But if they weren't around, the rat snakes here, the timber rattlesnakes here, they wouldn't have big meals to prey on. Maybe the odd rabbit every once in a while, but I'm sure squirrel is way more part of their diet than the rabbit is. I'm rambling at this point, guys. Somebody cut me off.
Yeah, Armen is definitely the guinea pig of the Herper series. What it's going to look like. So I figured, who better to have on than
absolutely
than Armen to be like the test mule for
perfectly laid back, and he has the knowledge that we seek. It's perfect.
Yeah,
you couldn't have picked a better person. Just so we're clear, Armen, he told me yesterday at like 10 o'clock at night, we're not going to do any questions. We're just going to do this. Oh, okay. That sounds good. Let's do that. I enjoy that thoroughly. I like not being prepared.
Well, sometimes conversations flow a little better that way because you're not forced to like, oh, I want to get to this. We didn't get to this.
True.
It's like, well, you go where it takes you, and sometimes you talk about something even more important or more interesting that you would have never thought of in the beginning because you just kind of go with the flow. So but sometimes it works the opposite way. But either I think so far we're talking about some cool stuff.
Oh yeah, and I like where it went as far as like towards the second half of this conversation. It got more about like human impacts on like natural wildlife, and human impacts on native reptiles and things, and I kind of like that idea of talking about the good and the bad of
I mean it's always good to talk about it,
and of just general like human activity, and what kind of impact that plays on on the kind of natural environment around us, which is why I asked about the rattlesnake wall. That's what kind of sparked that thought. I was like, yeah, that's an interesting, like, are they there because humans moved there, or are they there because humans created that environment for them? So that's an interesting thing to kind of dissect, and I like that. I kind of like that whole like vibe.
Yeah, there's also situations where I know people that do do rattlesnake removal and stuff like that, and they will release all the rattlesnakes that they get into kind of one general location, because they know they'll be safe there. But then all of a sudden you have a ton of one species in one spot, which also is really cool to see, but sometimes you're like, you don't know exactly how it'll play out because, I mean, until who knows, maybe 40, not even 40 years ago, people weren't doing rattlesnake removal. They were just usually just you kill them.
Yeah.
So, it's all kind of all of this is all new. I mean, we know animals can adapt to what we put them through or they don't, and they don't do good, and that's when we get animals that are threatened or endangered. So we just have to, like we've been talking about, be mindful, and unfortunately we're all gonna have to learn the hard way because we we have never humans have never been so in charge of our environment. So
Yeah, that's a powerful statement. You're absolutely correct. We as a species only during the Industrial Revolution could really change massive tracts of land to not be conducive to wildlife living there, the turning up the soil for farming, so on and so forth, on the scale that was damaging to the ecosystem. It's a relatively short amount of time. I mean, I would love to say something like 100 years, maybe at most. Within that time frame is where almost all of the technologies that I love have come to pass and been created. But in that short window of time for us as people, the species that we've impacted has been insurmountable. And I think that should go without saying that we really kind of owe it to them. We do something at this point. And that another thing, there haven't been massive studies done on a lot of wild reptile populations because there's never been a need or a push to, in terms of like what really is healthy, what really is a healthy group of something. I know they're in the last 25 years, there's been a larger increase in that kind of thinking for biologists. And it's not just the big, powerful top predators like crocodilians that are getting all the play. They're starting to research those small, probably people like yourself, Armen, who are very fascinated by the smallest creatures living among us. I'm working with, 3-foot tegu, and you've got a room full of anoles. Like that right there is changing the entire understanding of what is healthy versus what we could be doing better in nature, not only in captivity. And that's a push in the proper direction, 1,000%. That's an amazing situation, changing the world for the better.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
So on that note, Brian, I did want to say, I did want to ask Armen, back to beginning of this conversation, we were talking more about like species. Is there a species out there that you haven't found that you're like dying to see and you've never seen?
Oh, that's a good question.
locally or anywhere in the world?
Oh shit.
Let's do both. Let's do both. Do locally first, and then we'll do all around the world second.
Yeah.
Locally, that's so hard. There's a lot. So as far as snakes, the sidewinders are a desert species, and I'm kind of more coastal, and I haven't really had the opportunity to go find them, but hopefully this year I want to find some sidewinders. They're relatively common, so shouldn't be that hard, but that's one species I want to look for. And then as far as lizards, there's so many that I need to go find in the desert. There's like different species of chuckwallas and collared lizards, and
I love them.
And yeah, there's so many cool ones. And then not like worldwide, but a little more than local is Northern California, where these are is like 8 hours away. There's Shasta Mount Shasta alligator lizards, which are a super cool species. I want to go find. They have like a steel blue head with a bright yellow body, and
Wow.
it's like you would think this is a tropical arboreal lizard because it's just like a bright lizard that lives in the mountains. So that's one I'm definitely in the next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm gonna head up there with some friends and hopefully find some of those.
Awesome.
Worldwide, I would say there's literally hundreds of anole species I would love to see. But if I had to pick,
Really?
if I'm not gonna pick
Anoles?
an anole, I would do, because I can't pick just one. I think I'd love to see any of them. I would like I'm wanting to, and I'm trying to plan with some friends to go to Mexico to see some abronia. So or alligator lizards. I just like alligator lizards and weird dragon looking reptiles and lizards
Oh
specifically.
yeah.
So I think we're gonna go to as part of Mexico where kill two birds with one stone. So we'll see Abronia graminia, which is the green Mexican alligator lizards that most people know, and then we'll also see Anolis petersii, the Peters anole, which is a really large species of anole that's also kind of montane, which I actually have some that I'm trying to breed. So that'll be really cool to see both of those kind of living side by side in the wild. Because oftentimes you don't think people know Abronia is kind of a cloud forest species, but you don't think of anoles as that. Which, like I said, in Ecuador there's a ton, and then also in Mexico there'll be that too. So I think Abronia would be the goal species to see in the wild if I can.
Yeah. What about you, Brian?
Me? For
Yeah.
what? Oh, what? The same question?
Same question.
Oh God, we can't do that. Then we're gonna have to do this every time with everyone. No.
No,
All right.
Just this time.
Listen,
Okay, fine. Just this
listen,
time. I'll never
listen.
ask again. Ever. I will never ask.
I absolutely adore the American crocodiles. I will go to Costa Rica before my life is over, and I will see them in plentiful, bountiful numbers. I know I can see them in Florida, but that's not where they're in high numbers. I want to go where I can see 20 at one time just hanging out. And Costa Rica has a couple other bucket list animals. Bushmasters, number one, the longest pit viper in the world. Pretty fitting. I love vipers. And as far as locally to me, really, I want to see 5-line skinks in more than like one every 20 years. I want to see them somewhere close where I can film them, take a couple pictures, something that I have a recurring scenario that I could go back to and find them. I mean, I like turtles, but I'm really not a turtle person, but we have some fascinating turtle species here in New York State. Wood turtles are some of the smartest turtles I've ever had the pleasure of working with. I mean, they're like super brilliant and they get big. They're not small turtles by any means, but they're like really personable and they have their own little personalities. And I don't see personalities with snake species as much as I see them with tortoise species. I see snakes as more of like, this one likes associating with people, this one doesn't like associating with people, kind of a thing. But like wood turtles have, and a lot of other turtle species do as well, including snapping turtles, by the way, have like, once they're down to a routine, man, they're learning, they're understanding what's going on. They're basically a step away from talking as far as I'm concerned, with how much you can read their body language. It's pretty remarkable. And I've always felt that way. I love the turtles and tortoises, just have a personality of their own. And I haven't seen a yellow spot in the last probably 5 or 6 years, and I'd like to go see a yellow spot again some point relatively soon. They're tiny, they're almost jet black with tiny yellow dots all over them. They are absolutely fascinating color, size. I mean, they're not very big. They're less flat than pond turtles, but they're still almost fully aquatic, and it's just a really cool species to see. I'd love to be able to find a spot where I could see them a lot. Again, that same scenario with the 5-line, being able to regularly go and see them. That's probably. And what about you, Greg? If you're going to put me on the spot.
Oh, great.
You're
No,
welcome.
actually,
Did
I've
not
been
think-
planning. This is the first time I've been planning a response this whole
Oh, geez.
conversation. No, so definitely like locally forever, I would say, since I was a little kid. The one thing that I want to see is the oh my God. Now the green one, the green snake. Is it with the rough green snake, right?
Rough green, smooth.
Yeah,
green.
the rough green. Huh?
Smooth green, rough green, rough green.
No, I think it's rough.
I think it's rough.
I think it's rough.
I think
The
it's
rough green snake. And you know, I was planning that when Armen was talking about the lizard in Northern California that looks like it should be from the tropics.
Yep.
The green snake is that same exact thing for me. I'm like, when I see it in pictures and videos, and I see other people finding them, I'm like, that it looks. I mean, the way it moves its head, you know, it's like it's very stick like in the way that it extends its neck out, and it looks like, I want to say like a leaf nose snake, I think they're called, or one of those other like green snakes.
Whenever I see them, I always think of mambas, the green mamba, almost instantly, just because
Oh,
of
really?
that, the way that those the way that they position their head, right? So they're almost like turning to look at you, whereas most snakes will like kind of move their whole
right.
coil, right?
Yeah.
They just kind of like they move that one little, like, just their neck muscle is moving.
Yeah,
and
they
it's
turn
the
their head.
weirdest thing. It's the weirdest look in the world, and mambas do
Yeah.
it too. So it's just really hysterical to
Yeah.
me. Good species, by the way.
And honestly, I always want to think of that it's a lizard, but it's never a lizard. Is a Bolin's python. Like, if I could go and find any maybe animal on Earth, it would be a Bolin's python. You know, in the wild, not in someone's house.
Yeah, that's a cool one.
But yeah,
Very pretty species.
yeah,
Super awesome.
yeah.
Super awesome.
So yeah, so I don't know. It's been an hour.
Yeah.
It's late. I'm tired. I'm like, for me, it's late. My brain is like, you know, in freak out mode. Like I'm starting to get very talkative.
Cooked.
Yeah, I'm getting very talkative, and
That's okay.
yeah, I need to kind of reel it back in so I can actually fall asleep.
But that sounds like a good place to leave it. I mean, you know, Armen, I really thank you again for being the guinea pig today. You know, this was a new series that we're trying to feel out. You know, we did, I don't even know how many episodes, 10 or 12 of the other one, and now we're just trying to roll into another season of doing something. And I don't know when these are going to be published just yet, but obviously Craig will let you know and everything. And
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
This is going to like technically be season 2. I don't really care how that works.
Yeah, I don't think it matters. It's
it doesn't
podcast.
Matter,
it's
not. It's going to be fun regardless.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it, and definitely send me or Greg, either way, some pictures of that man-made created rattlesnake haven.
I will.
I'd really appreciate that. And of course, I mean, I see your Instagram now, by the way. I actually followed you right before we did our last podcast together, and your stuff is absolutely incredible. Some of those lizards that you have are, I mean, they look like painted art. They don't even look like animals. It's just phenomenal. You know, and the quality of health. I mean, you know, the images that I get from video, pictures, what have you, are just incomparable to others. You know, just absolutely out of this world care. I can see how much you care about all of those animals. They seem to gravitate towards you as well. You know, they really like jump on you, and you hang out with them, and it's really, you know, it's really an awesome thing you got going on there with all those tiny little guys that I would never, and not all tiny little guys either, by the way. Some of those I think it's a little tail, and I'm like, oh, it's going to be a small lizard, and it's 18 inches long. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. I like it.
Thank you. Yeah, I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
You're welcome. We appreciate you.
Yep. So I guess that'll.
Yeah, you got to stop recording, Greg.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, don't just leave the meeting. You have to push stop recording.